Oh, sorry, loser. I forgot to tell you you're fired. We're downsizing.
The box was already packed when I walked in. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Not half-packed, not rushed. Perfectly arranged. Folders aligned, pens taped together. My mug wrapped in bubble plastic like someone cared whether it broke. The kind of care that takes time, planning, permission. For a second, I wondered if I'd come in on the wrong day, or the wrong life. Mark Reynolds was leaning back in his chair, hands folded behind his head, watching me the way people watch elevators close, detached, mildly impatient, already moving on in their minds. His jacket was still on. He hadn't planned to stay long. "Oh, right. You're here." That tone, as if my presence had slipped his mind the same way you forget to send an email. "I forgot to tell you," he continued smoothly. "You're fired. Staff reduction." The words landed softly, almost politely. No build-up, no warning, no meeting invite with a vague subject line like "quick catch-up." I didn't answer right away. I was looking at the box. My box. Everything I'd touched in 3 years, reduced to cardboard and tape. Even my notebook was there, the one I never left on my desk. Someone had gone through my drawers, carefully, thoroughly, quietly. "That's it?" I asked finally. My voice surprised me. Calm, neutral, like I was confirming an order. Mark sighed, as if I'd inconvenienced him by not reacting properly. "Don't make this awkward," he said. "It's nothing personal. You were barely noticeable anyway." Barely noticeable. I waited for something inside me to snap, for heat, anger, shame, tears. Anything loud enough to justify what he was doing. Nothing came. There was only a strange stillness, like the moment before you realize you're not afraid of falling because you've already let go. I nodded once. No argument. No defense. No list of projects I'd saved, clients I'd kept, problems I'd solved before they reached his desk. I didn't remind him that half the systems he relied on had my fingerprints all over them, invisible by design. I turned around and walked toward the door. Behind me, his chair creaked. "You don't want to say anything?" he asked. I paused, my hand on the handle. For a second, I considered it. A speech. A final line. Something sharp enough to stay with him. Instead, I opened the door and left. The hallway felt longer than usual. Every step echoed too clearly, like the building itself had noticed me only now, on my way out. People avoided eye contact. They always had. I was good at not being seen, good at blending into productivity, into silence, into "she'll handle it." At the elevator, I caught my reflection in the metal doors. Same posture, same expression, no visible damage. That scared me more than if I'd been shaking. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. I stood there with the box in my arms, watching employees pass me with their badges swinging, their coffee cups full, their futures intact. For now. My phone buzzed. Nothing important. A system notification. One of the automated alerts I'd set up months ago. Still running, still working, still doing exactly what it was designed to do. Unlike me, apparently. I sat on a bench across the street and placed the box beside me. For a moment, I imagined leaving it there, walking away empty-handed, letting someone else decide what mattered. Instead, I opened it. On top lay a sticky note. My handwriting. Follow up with client. Don't trust verbal approval. I almost smiled. Mark thought I was invisible because I didn't demand attention, because I didn't interrupt meetings, because I solved problems before they became impressive. He mistook silence for absence. What he didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that silence isn't emptiness, it's storage. And everything they'd ignored, everything they'd handed off without learning how it worked, Everything they'd let me carry because it was easier than understanding it themselves was about to surface. I picked up the box, stood, and walked away. Not knowing yet where I was going, only knowing one thing with absolute clarity. They hadn't erased me. They'd just removed the lid. Ghost. That was the word Mark liked most. Not to my face at first. Never directly. It slipped out in meetings, half joking, half dismissive, always wrapped in a smile so he could deny it later. Let the ghost handle it, he'd say, waving a hand when a problem came up. She doesn't need to be on the call. She'll send it afterward. Clients don't even remember her name. That's efficiency. Everyone laughed. Not because it was funny, but because Mark had decided it was acceptable. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. Words were cheap. Results weren't. I focused on outcomes, on clean solutions, on making sure nothing ever collapsed loudly enough to require his involvement. I became the person who absorbed chaos quietly, translated panic into spreadsheets, turned impossible deadlines into delivered files without asking for credit. Ghosts don't need recognition. Ghosts just need to work. The irony is, I trained myself into that role. Every time I chose silence over correction, every time I fixed something without documenting the effort, every time I let someone else explain my work in a meeting because interrupting felt rude, not weak, polite, professional, invisible. At night, though, his voice echoed louder than the office ever had. Barely noticeable. Background work. Clients don't remember you. I replayed moments that now felt like warning signs I'd chosen to ignore. The time a client praised the team for a solution I'd built alone, and Mark nodded without looking at me. The meeting where my proposal was presented without my name attached, and I convinced myself it didn't matter because the idea was implemented. The performance review where he said, "You're reliable, but you don't really stand out," as if reliability weren't the spine holding the place upright. I told myself standing out was dangerous. That visibility attracted blame. That safety lived in being indispensable, but unseen. I didn't realize how carefully I was disappearing. The morning after I was fired, I woke up at 6:12 a.m., the same time I always did. My body hadn't received the memo yet. I reached for my phone to check overnight alerts, then remembered there was no reason to. No inbox, no systems, no responsibility. The absence felt wrong, like phantom pain. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, listening to the quiet. It was different from office quiet. This one didn't hum. It didn't expect anything from me. That's when it hit me. The most painful thought of all. They didn't erase me. I helped them do it. Every time I stayed silent, I reinforced the idea that I didn't need a voice. Every time I fixed things quietly, I taught them they didn't need to know how they worked. Every time I accepted being called background, I made myself part of the scenery. Mark didn't invent the ghost. He just named it. Around noon, I opened my laptop out of habit. The screen lit up with folders I'd mirrored locally. Backups, drafts, personal copies of workflows I'd refined over years. Things I'd never been asked to explain because they just worked. I closed the laptop again. Not yet. If silence had been my weakness, maybe it could become something else. By evening, my phone buzzed for the first time since I'd left the building. A message from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Mark. Quick question. Did you handle the Redwood client renewals yourself, or was that automated?" No greeting, no acknowledgement, no apology, just confusion. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Ghosts don't answer questions. Ghosts linger. They make their absence felt slowly, structurally, in places no one notices until something collapses. I locked the phone and set it face down on the table. For the first time, I wasn't background noise. I was silence, And silence, I was starting to understand, could be very loud. The first day passed quietly. Too quietly. No emails, no calls, no accidental, "Can you just check one thing?" messages that used to slip through even on weekends. It was as if someone had flipped a switch and erased my existence from the system, or at least tried to. I cleaned my apartment simply to keep my hands busy. Folded clothes that didn't need folding. Washed a mug that was already clean. My mind kept reaching for problems that weren't mine anymore, like a tongue searching a missing tooth. On the second day, I stopped pretending I was fine. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, scrolling without reading, waiting for something to happen. Not because I wanted them to call, but because I needed to know whether they would. They didn't. By the third day, the silence felt intentional, strategic, Mark's style. He liked letting people sweat. He believed discomfort softened resistance, that eventually I'd panic, call back, ask for clarity, maybe even apologize for leaving without a scene. I imagined him telling someone, "She'll reach out. They always do." That thought almost made me laugh. The fourth day was harder. Not because of fear, but because of memory. I kept thinking about the little things. The processes no one else touched because they were too complex. The client histories stored only in my head. The alerts that routed directly to me because Mark once said, "You're faster. Just handle it." I wondered when they'd notice. Not if. When. On the morning of the seventh day, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The kind that comes right before a storm breaks, when the air goes still and heavy, as if holding its breath. I was making coffee when my phone vibrated on the counter. One message. "Mark, where are you?" No greeting, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what he'd done, just expectation. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. The words were almost funny in their simplicity, as if I'd stepped out for lunch and forgotten to come back. I typed a reply. "You fired me." Deleted it. Typed another. "This is inappropriate." Deleted. A third. "Please direct further communication to HR." Deleted that too. Every version felt like a continuation of the same pattern. Me responding, clarifying, smoothing things over, making it easier for him to stay exactly who he was. So I did something unfamiliar. I did nothing. I locked the phone and placed it back on the counter, face down, like a decision. The rest of the day passed slowly. My attention drifted to small things, the sound of traffic outside, the way sunlight moved across the floor, the fact that my shoulders felt lighter without constant tension. Still, somewhere in the back of my mind, I was listening, waiting. By evening, the phone buzzed again. Another message. "Mark, call me. This is urgent." Urgent. The word he used when he wanted obedience disguised as responsibility. The word that had pulled me into late nights and weekend fixes and quiet heroics no one ever acknowledged. I didn't answer. Instead, I powered the phone off completely. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. Deliberate. For years, silence had been something done to me. Meetings I wasn't invited to. Decisions made without my input. Credit given elsewhere. I'd endured it, adapted to it, learned to function inside it. Now I was choosing it. And that changed everything. That night, I slept better than I had in months. When I woke up, the phone was still off. I let it stay that way while I showered, dressed, ate breakfast like a person with nowhere to rush to. Only after noon did I turn it back on. The vibration was immediate, violent, relentless, missed calls, messages stacked on messages, different numbers, Mark, an unknown extension, someone from operations. I didn't open any of them. I didn't need to. I could already imagine the office, the confusion creeping in, the quiet panic. The realization that systems don't run themselves. They run on people who know how fragile they really are. For the first time, they were the ones staring at their screens, refreshing inboxes, checking phones out of habit rather than hope. For the first time, they were waiting. And I understood something with unsettling clarity. Silence isn't weakness, it's leverage, and they had just taught me how powerful it could be. The call came from a private number. I almost didn't answer. Not out of fear, out of curiosity. Curiosity is dangerous when you're learning to hold your ground. Still, something in me wanted to hear it. Not Mark. Never Mark. Someone else. I slid my finger across the screen. Hello? There was a pause. Breathing. Controlled, but uneven. It's me, a woman said quietly. From operations. I'm calling from my personal phone. I recognized her voice immediately. Claire. She'd sat 3 desks away from me for years, close enough to hear my keyboard, far enough to never ask what I was working on. They're panicking, she whispered, as if the walls could listen through a cell signal. I thought you should know. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, said nothing. It started yesterday, she continued. The Redwood client called. They had questions about the renewal structure, the escalation clauses, the risk buffers. No one knew where anything was documented. I almost smiled. Almost. Mark said it must have moved something, Claire went on. It said it was never theirs. Legal asked for summaries that don't exist. They keep opening folders and finding half answers. She hesitated. Then someone said it, out loud. I waited. She used to handle this. The words landed differently than I expected. Not satisfying, not triumphant. Heavy, like confirmation. Claire kept talking, the way people do when the truth has been sitting in their chest too long. Another client demanded a call this morning. They asked for you by name. Not Mark. Not the team. You. By name. The ghost had a name after all. Mark told them you were on leave, she said. Temporary. That you'd follow up. I closed my eyes. Then the East Bridge account flagged an anomaly. You know, the one with the layered approvals? No one remembers how you structured it. Finance is stuck. Compliance is nervous. I pictured the spreadsheet instantly. I could see the logic in my head, the pathways, the safeguards. It was muscle memory. Reflex. They're holding an emergency meeting, Claire added. Closed doors. Mark's voice is louder than usual. That did make me smile. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Another pause. Because I watched you carry things none of us understood, she said. And because I think they're about to pretend you never mattered, unless you remind them. There it was. The invitation to step back in quietly, to rescue them without acknowledgement, to save the structure and let them keep the credit. The old pattern. Thank you for calling, I said gently. That's it? She asked, surprise slipping into her voice. That's it. After we hung up, I stood there for a long time, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. Then the email started. Not to my inbox. I didn't have access anymore, but forwarded screenshots from people I still trusted. Subject lines alone told the story. Urgent. Redwood renewal. Need clarification ASAP. Who owns this process? Client threatening to pause contract. One message made my chest tighten. Can someone please find her documentation? She always had it. Always. Had. Past tense. By late afternoon, a contract was canceled. Not officially announced. Those things never are. But the rumor moved fast. 6 figures gone. Maybe more. No explosion. Just a quiet failure. The kind that doesn't make headlines but leaves scars in quarterly reports. That evening, my phone rang again. I didn't answer. It rang again, and again, then stopped. A message followed, not from Mark this time, but from an unknown executive number. "Hi, this is Jonathan Miller. Please call me when you see this." The CEO. I stared at the name, feeling something shift inside me. Not excitement, not fear, recognition. They weren't looking for a ghost anymore. They were looking for a missing organ, something they'd removed without understanding what it did, and were now discovering they couldn't function without. I didn't call back. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window as the city lights came on one by one. Somewhere across town, conference rooms were filling, voices rising, blame circling without landing. And for the first time since I'd been fired, I felt something close to peace. Not because they were struggling, but because I finally understood my value didn't come from being present. It came from being necessary. And necessity, once revealed, can't be unseen. They had built their confidence on my silence. Now they would learn what that silence had been holding together. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Not vibrated, not buzzed. Rang. The kind of sound that cuts through sleep, through walls, through denial. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, lights off, the city glowing faintly through the window, when the screen lit up. Mark Reynolds. Of course it was. I watched it ring, counted the seconds, let it stop on its own. 3 seconds later, it rang again. I answered on the third call. "What?" I said, my voice flat. No greeting from him, no hesitation. "We need you to come in tomorrow," Mark said sharply. "First thing, this isn't a discussion." There it was. The tone he used when he wanted authority without justification. I leaned back against the headboard, staring at the ceiling. "You fired me," I said calmly. Silence. I could hear him breathing now, controlled, but strained. "Don't be dramatic," he muttered. "We all say things. HR will sort it out. We need you to fix what's happening. Fix. Not help. Not talk. Fix." "You packed my desk," I said. "You told me I was barely noticeable." Another pause. Longer. "That's not the point," he snapped. "You know what I meant." I laughed. Not loud, not mocking. Slow. It surprised both of us. "You don't get to tell me what you meant anymore," I said. "Listen," he said, irritation creeping in. "You're burning bridges. This industry is smaller than you think." There it was. The threat disguised as advice. "Funny," I replied. I was thinking the same thing. I ended the call before he could respond. For a moment, I just sat there, phone still in my hand, heart steady, pulse calm. I'd expected adrenaline, anger, satisfaction. What I felt instead was clarity. I turned the phone off completely. No airplane mode. Off. The next morning, the city woke without me. I stayed in bed longer than usual, listening to traffic, to footsteps in the hallway, to life continuing without asking anything from me. When I finally turned my phone back on, it vibrated so violently it almost slipped from my hand. Messages stacked on messages. Unknown numbers. Internal extensions. Voicemails I didn't open. "Please call. Urgent. We need you today. Let's talk." One message stood out, shorter than the rest. From Mark. "You're being childish. Don't destroy your career over pride." I read it 3 times. Childish. As if dignity were a tantrum. As if self-respect were immaturity. I set the phone down on the table and made coffee. Took my time. Watched steam rise from the mug. Felt how steady my hands were. "You already destroyed it for me," I thought. "I'm just deciding what grows next." By noon, Jonathan Miller called again. This time, I answered. "Thank you for picking up," he said immediately. His voice was calm, measured. The voice of someone used to control but aware it was slipping. "I won't take much of your time." "You already are," I replied. A pause. then a quiet exhale. Fair, he said. Be honest with me. Are you willing to talk? About what? I asked. About what you did here, he said, and why everything seems to be unraveling without you. There it was. Not denial, not dismissal, recognition. I didn't do anything alone, I said. I built systems, quietly, because that's what I was asked to do. Mark says you're difficult, Jonathan added carefully. I smiled to myself. Mark says many things, I replied. You hired him. I just worked around him. Silence again. Different from Mark's. Thoughtful. What do you want? Jonathan finally asked. Not how much. Not how soon. What? I didn't answer right away. I looked around my apartment, at the space I'd been too exhausted to notice before, at the life I'd been postponing. Time, I said, and respect. Another exhale. We can talk, he said slowly. I'm sure you can, I replied. I'll let you know when I'm ready. I ended the call. That afternoon, word spread faster than any official announcement ever could. People I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me, carefully, cautiously. Hope you're well. Heard things are intense. Didn't realize how much you handled. I didn't reply to any of them, because this wasn't about acknowledgement anymore. It was about control. And for the first time in my career, it wasn't in their hands. They had mistaken my silence for obedience, my patience for permanence, my loyalty for weakness. Now, as deadlines slipped and contracts trembled and meetings dragged on without solutions, they were learning the difference between someone who follows orders and someone who holds the structure together. They didn't lose me when they fired me. They lost me when they assumed I'd come back the same way I'd left. Quiet, grateful, invisible. And that was a mistake they were only just beginning to understand. I didn't count them at first. At the beginning, they blurred together. Vibrations, banners sliding down my screen, names half recognized, numbers I knew by heart but hadn't saved because I'd never needed to. It wasn't until late afternoon, when the noise finally slowed, that I scrolled back and realized how far my thumb had to travel. 97 messages, 12 missed calls, 3 voicemails I hadn't opened. And that was just from one day. By the next morning, the number crossed 100. Please, can you just explain this part? We're stuck. Client is escalating. Jonathan asked for you again. HR wants to clarify your status. We made a mistake. That phrase appeared more than once. We made a mistake. Not I. Not Mark. We. Collective guilt is convenient. It spreads responsibility thin enough that no one has to carry it fully. I sat at my kitchen table, phone face down, notebook open in front of me. For the first time in years, I was writing for myself. Not action items, not workflows, not quiet reminders meant to prevent disasters no one would ever thank me for. Just thoughts. I wrote down everything I'd swallowed over the years. Every meeting I wasn't invited to because you'll just implement it anyway. Every late night that ended with a forwarded FYI instead of acknowledgement. Every time Mark spoke over me, corrected me on things I'd designed or smiled while doing it. Seeing it on paper made it impossible to minimize. Around noon, I finally opened the voicemails. The first was from HR. Polite, nervous, overly formal. We're hoping to discuss a possible misunderstanding regarding your departure. Misunderstanding. The second was from a senior manager I barely knew. Hey, I know we haven't worked closely, but people keep saying you're the only one who understands the cross-account logic. Maybe we could jump on a quick call? Quick. The third voicemail stopped me. Mark. His voice was different this time. Lower, tighter, stripped of its usual confidence. Look, things have gotten out of hand. I didn't think it would blow up like this. Call me. No apology, but something close to fear. I deleted it, A message came in almost immediately after. Text this time. Mark, you're enjoying this. Be honest. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Me. No. I'm setting boundaries you never respected. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Mark. You always took things too personally. There it was. The sentence he used whenever consequences approached. I didn't respond. An hour later, another message from him came through. Shorter. Sharper. Mark. Jonathan is considering restructuring. Don't do something you can't undo. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was revealing. For the first time, he wasn't protecting the company. He was protecting himself. That evening, I finally answered Jonathan's call. I won't ask you to come back, he said immediately. Not like this. That surprised me. Good, I replied, because I wouldn't. He was quiet for a moment. I underestimated how much was centralized around you, he admitted. That's on me. The words landed carefully, as if he were testing their weight. Understatement, I said. A pause, then a small, almost rueful laugh. What would it take for you to even consider helping us stabilize? He asked. Helping, not returning. Progress. Transparency, I said, and honesty, including about why I was let go. Another silence. Longer. Mark framed it as redundancy. Jonathan said slowly. Cost optimization. Did you verify that? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. No, he said finally. I trusted him. There it was. The real admission. Trust has consequences, I replied. So does ignoring people who don't demand attention. I could hear him exhale. If you're willing, he said, we can talk about a role that reflects what you actually do. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at the city through my window. Lights flickering on, offices emptying, people carrying their days home with them. For years, I'd been one of the last lights on, the quiet constant. Now I was watching from the outside. I'll think about it, I said. That was all. No promise, no commitment. After we hung up, I turned my phone face down again. Another message buzzed in, slipping through before the screen went dark. From Mark. Mark. You're making a lot of enemies. I picked the phone up just long enough to reply. Me. No. I'm revealing them. Then I turned the phone off. That night, sleep came easily. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't explaining. I wasn't fixing. I was choosing. And every unanswered plea, every delayed response, every moment of silence was doing what years of quiet competence never had, teaching them exactly how much space I'd been holding for them, and what happens when that space is gone. The pause unsettled them more than my refusal ever could. If I had said no, they would have adjusted. If I had said yes, they would have rushed to contain me, redefine me, box me back into something manageable. But maybe, I'll think about it, created a vacuum they didn't know how to fill. 3 days passed. I didn't reach out. Neither did Jonathan. But the company did, in its own indirect, nervous way. Former co-workers started appearing in my messages like cautious messengers from a burning city. Hope you're doing okay. Heard things are complicated. Just wanted to say I always admired how you worked. Admired. Past tense. Safe now that it costs them nothing. One message came from Claire again. They've stopped pretending, she said quietly when I answered. Meetings are openly about you now. About me? I asked. About the whole, she corrected. They don't say your name at first. They say the process, the structure, the oversight. But then someone always says it. Says what? She didn't hesitate. She would have caught this. I closed my eyes. Mark is unraveling, Claire continued. He's snapping at people, blaming them for not knowing things he never bothered to learn. He rewrote history in yesterday's meeting, said you were junior support. Junior. I almost laughed. And Jonathan? I asked. Quiet, she said. Which is worse? After the call, I sat with that word. Quiet. I knew that kind of quiet. The kind that came before decisions that couldn't be undone. Jonathan Miller didn't panic loudly. He observed. He waited. He let patterns reveal themselves. The pause wasn't empty. It was evaluative. On the fourth day, he called again. I've reviewed the last 18 months, he said without preamble. Contracts, escalations, risk mitigation. Your name appears everywhere. Sometimes directly, sometimes not. I wasn't hiding, I replied. I just wasn't credited. I see that now, he said, and I see how easy it was for others to take advantage of that. I leaned back in my chair, listening. Mark built his authority on delegation, Jonathan continued, but delegation without understanding is dependency. I missed that. Missed. Not ignored. Another careful word. What happens to him? I asked. There was a pause, smaller this time. That depends on what happens next, Jonathan said. There it was. Not a threat. Not a promise. A lever. I'm not interested in revenge, I said slowly. I'm interested in correction. Then we may be aligned, he replied. He asked me to come in. Not to work. Not to fix. To talk. On neutral ground, he added. No mark. No agenda. I agreed. The office felt different when I returned. Not dramatic. Not hostile. Careful. People watched without staring. Conversations stopped and resumed as I passed. I realized then how deeply I'd been woven into the place. Not visibly, but functionally. Like wiring inside walls. You don't see it until something shorts out. Jonathan was already in the conference room when I arrived. No jacket. Sleeves rolled up. A man preparing to listen, not perform. Thank you for coming, he said. I'm not here to rescue anyone, I replied. I know, he said. That's why I asked. We talked for over an hour. Not about feelings, about systems. I explained how things actually worked, where the pressure points were, which clients relied on informal assurances no one else tracked, which shortcuts were safe, and which were disasters waiting to happen. He took notes. Not once did he interrupt. Why didn't anyone else know this? He asked at one point. I met his eyes. Because no one ever asked, I said. They asked Mark. Mark answered with confidence. Confidence was mistaken for knowledge. He nodded slowly. If you came back, he said carefully, it wouldn't be to return to what you were. It would have to erase it, I replied. Agreed. Silence settled between us again, this time mutual. Mark believes you're difficult, Jonathan said. He believes this situation proves it. I smiled faintly. Mark believes control is leadership, I said, and silence is submission. Jonathan didn't argue. What would your ideal role look like? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. I'd thought about it. Carefully. Not in terms of title, but in terms of boundaries. Autonomy, I said. Authority that matches responsibility. And no intermediaries who translate my work into something smaller. He nodded. And Mark? There it was. The question they'd all been circling. I won't work under him, I said simply, and I won't pretend nothing happened. Jonathan leaned back, studying the ceiling for a moment. If I offer you leadership, he said slowly, you'll be stepping into visibility. That comes with resistance. I know, I replied. I'm not afraid of being seen anymore. That was the truth. The pause that followed wasn't strategic this time. It was final. "Let me handle the rest," Jonathan said. When I left the building, my phone buzzed. A message from Mark. "Mark, we need to talk. Man to man." I didn't reply, because the pause was over. And whatever came next wouldn't be negotiated in whispers or late-night calls. It would be decided in daylight, with titles, rooms, and consequences. For years, I'd been the space between decisions. Now, I was about to become one of them, and that was the longest pause of all. The one where everyone realizes the silence has ended and something irreversible is about to speak. They scheduled the meeting for Monday morning. Not a casual coffee, not a hallway conversation. A room, glass walls, a table long enough to feel like distance. The kind of meeting that rewrites internal narratives whether anyone admits it or not. Jonathan was already there when I arrived. So was Mark. That was intentional. Mark stood when he saw me, a reflex he didn't fully control. He corrected himself quickly, pretending he'd just been stretching. His tie was perfectly straight, his jaw tight, his eyes sharp with something that wasn't confidence anymore, calculation. "Let's sit," Jonathan said evenly. No titles, no small talk. We did. For a moment, no one spoke. The city hummed behind the glass, traffic flowing like nothing important was about to happen. I realized then how often life-changing moments arrive without ceremony. "I'll be direct," Jonathan began. "The company is unstable." Mark shifted. "Temporarily," he said quickly. "We've handled worse." Jonathan didn't look at him. "We haven't," he replied. "We've avoided worse. Mostly because she was preventing it." Silence. Mark's gaze snapped to me. Sharp. Disbelieving. "This is exaggerated," he said. "She was support. Efficient, yes, but replaceable?" Jonathan finished. Mark hesitated for half a second too long. "Everyone is," he said finally. Jonathan folded his hands. "Then explain why 3 senior clients requested her by name last week." Mark opened his mouth. Closed it. "Explain why compliance couldn't answer basic questions without her documentation," Jonathan continued. "Explain why revenue projections dropped the moment she left." Each sentence landed like a measured blow, not emotional, factual. Mark turned to me then. "You planned this," he said quietly. "You withheld information." I met his eyes. "No," I said calmly. "I stopped providing unpaid insurance for your ignorance." His face flushed. "You could have helped," he snapped. "Instead, you chose to watch things burn." Jonathan raised a hand. "No," he said firmly. "She chose not to compensate for a structural failure we allowed." Allowed. That word mattered. Jonathan turned to me. "I asked you here to name your condition," he said. "Not your salary, your condition." Mark stiffened. "Condition," he repeated. "This isn't how negotiations—" "It is," Jonathan cut in, "because we are not negotiating from equal positions." I felt the weight of the moment settle in. Not power. Responsibility. "I don't want money," I said. Mark scoffed before he could stop himself. "Then what do you want?" he asked. "An apology? A title?" I looked at him fully then. Really looked. For years, I'd avoided direct eye contact in meetings like this. It felt safer. Smaller. Not anymore. "Your position," I said. The room froze. Even the city outside seemed to pause. Mark laughed once, sharp and incredulous. "You're not serious." Jonathan didn't react. "She is," he said quietly. Mark's smile faltered. "This is absurd," he said. "She's not ready. She's never led a department." "She already runs half the office," Jonathan replied. "She just never claimed it." Mark stood. "This is personal," he said, voice rising. "You're letting emotions dictate—" "Sit down," Jonathan said. Not loud. Final. Mark obeyed. Jonathan turned to me again. If you return, he said, you will lead operations, direct reporting to me, full authority to restructure processes and teams as you see fit. My chest tightened slightly, not with fear, but with the gravity of being seen accurately for the first time. And Mark? I asked. Jonathan didn't hesitate. Mark will step aside. Mark's breath hitched. You can't be serious, he said. After everything I've built. You built dependency, Jonathan replied. She built stability. That was it. No shouting, no humiliation, just clarity. I considered the offer carefully, not because I doubted my ability, but because I understood the cost. Visibility, resistance, isolation, but also truth. I'll accept, I said slowly, on one more condition. Jonathan nodded. Nothing that happened here gets rewritten, I continued. No quiet reassignment. No mutual decision. What happened stays on record. Mark looked at Jonathan, panic flickering behind his eyes. Jonathan held my gaze. Agreed, he said. Mark stood again, this time without pretense. You're making a mistake, he said to Jonathan, then to me, bitterly. You enjoyed this? I shook my head. No, I said calmly. I survived it. He left without another word. The door closed softly behind him. Jonathan exhaled. You know this will change how people see you, he said. I nodded. Good, I replied. When I walked out of the conference room, the office fell silent. Not because they were afraid, because they understood. For the first time, I wasn't walking past them unseen. I was walking forward, into a role that had always been mine, waiting for me to stop disappearing. And the silence that followed wasn't emptiness anymore. It was recognition. The office didn't react all at once. There was no announcement, no email blast, no dramatic reshuffling of desks in the middle of the day. Just a subtle shift in posture, in glances, in the way conversations slowed when I passed. People felt it before they understood it. I walked in Monday morning at exactly the same time I always had. Same coat, same bag, same pace. But everything else was different. The receptionist looked up, startled, then smiled, uncertain, as if testing whether the gesture was allowed. Good morning, she said. Good morning, I replied. 2 words. Equal weight. I didn't go to my old desk. That space already felt like someone else's memory. Instead, I walked past it, down the corridor I used to avoid, toward the offices that had once felt off-limits. Mark was standing near the coffee machine. For a second, I almost didn't recognize him, not because he looked different, but because the context had shifted. He was no longer centered by authority, no longer buffered by assumed importance. He stood slightly apart from the others, cup in hand, shoulders tense, eyes darting like he was measuring how visible he suddenly was. He saw me. The smile he tried to summon didn't arrive in time. I nodded once. Polite. Neutral. The same nod I'd given him 1,000 times before when I passed his office with documents he didn't understand. I didn't stop. Behind me, conversation died mid-sentence. I could feel it. The recalibration happening in real time. People rewriting mental maps. Who mattered? Who decided? Who to watch now? In my new office, still mostly empty, still echoing, I closed the door and sat down. For a moment, I did nothing. No emails, no calls. I let myself feel it. Not triumph. Wait. Leadership isn't power. It's exposure. Everything sharpens. Every decision leaves a mark. I understood that now, more clearly than ever. A knock came an hour later. Mark. I didn't look up right away. Come in, I said. He stood just inside the doorway, not closing the door behind him. An old habit, keeping exits available. You enjoyed this, he said finally, bitterness cutting through his attempt at composure. I met his eyes. No, I replied calmly. I endured it. He scoffed. You could have handled this quietly, he said. Spared everyone the drama. You mean spared you the consequences, I said. He stiffened. You're not ready for this, he said. You don't know how much resistance you'll face. I do, I replied. I've been managing it for years. I just wasn't allowed to name it. Silence stretched between us. They'll turn on you, he said finally, the moment something goes wrong. I nodded. They always do, I said. The difference is, this time I'll be the one deciding what goes wrong, and why. He looked at me then with something close to disbelief. Not anger, not hatred. Loss. You think this makes you better than me, he said quietly. No, I replied. It makes me responsible. That was the truth he couldn't accept. He left without another word. The door clicked shut. The rest of the day unfolded in fragments. Brief introductions, cautious questions, people explaining their roles as if I might redefine them at any moment. Some were defensive, some relieved. A few were openly grateful. By evening, my inbox was full, not of pleas, but of information. Reports, summaries, threads that had once bypassed me now arrived directly, unfiltered. This was visibility. This was what they'd been protecting me from, and protecting themselves with. As the office emptied, I stood by the window and watched Mark leave. He didn't look back. For years, I'd been the one staying late, light on, keeping things running while others went home convinced of their own importance. Now the roles were reversed, and for the first time, I understood something that had taken me far too long to learn. Being invisible isn't humility, it's erasure. And survival isn't winning. It's refusing to disappear when the room finally goes quiet. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. But tonight, as the office settled into a new, unfamiliar silence, I allowed myself one small, necessary acknowledgement. I hadn't taken anything from him. I'd simply stepped into the space he'd been occupying without understanding. And that, more than any punishment, was what made him fade into the background. The office sounded different at night now. Not emptier, clearer. The low hum of servers, the distant elevator bell, the muted echo of footsteps from the cleaning crew. These sounds used to feel like pressure, like proof that something might break if I left too early. Now they felt neutral, honest. I stood alone in my office, jacket draped over the chair, city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass. Somewhere below, traffic flowed without caring who had power or who had lost it. For years, I had mistaken exhaustion for importance. If I stayed late, if I carried more, if I absorbed everything quietly, I believed I was proving my worth. In reality, I was teaching people how little they had to give me in return. Leadership didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with responsibility. The next few weeks confirmed it. There were mistakes, not disasters, but fractures that had been hidden under my silence for years. Teams realized they didn't actually understand their own processes. Managers struggled when there was no one quietly correcting their assumptions. Some resented me for exposing that. Others thanked me for finally naming it. Mark was gone by the end of the month. No dramatic firing, no public reckoning. Just a brief announcement about a strategic transition. The truth stayed on record, exactly as I'd demanded. It didn't need spectacle. It needed accuracy. I didn't celebrate. I reorganized. I delegated with explanation, not expectation. I documented everything I once carried alone. I spoke in meetings, not to dominate, but to clarify. When someone interrupted me, I didn't retreat. I waited, then continued. People adjusted. Some left. Some stayed and grew. One evening, Claire stopped by my office. "It's quieter," she said. "Is that bad?" I asked. She smiled. "No," she said. "It feels stable." After she left, I sat back down and let that word settle. Stable. That was what I'd been building all along, without realizing I was allowed to claim it. Late that night, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. A message. "Mark, you think this silence means you won?" I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed a reply. "Me. No. It means I stopped losing." I didn't send anything else. I didn't need to. Because the truth was simple, and it no longer required defense. They didn't break me when they fired me. They revealed me when they begged me to return. Power isn't always taken. Sometimes it waits, quietly, patiently, until the moment they realize they never should have let you go. I turned off the lights, locked my office, and walked out into the night. Not invisible, not silent. Just finally, unmistakably present.